Elazar, who will be speaking and presenting everything in memory of his parents.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I think I have until 10:15. Is that the way it works? Okay, let's start. This is a memory of my parents, and my parents, like many others, were outlaws in about 20 countries, wanted on capital charges, and of course, their crime was being Jewish. And in World War II, that was a crime punishable by death. My father and mother were in France. My father was a lieutenant in the Maquisée, in the French resistance, where he survived. And my mother escaped a prison camp, and they met in Marseille in 1945 and rebuilt everything from the start. Both of them lost many or most of their siblings and their relatives in World War II. Now, the question of Mashiach, of when Mashiach will come, of how Mashiach will come, has been a question asked starting from Chazal nearly 2,000 years ago. But at that time, Chazal and most of the Rishonim, the rabbis who were about 1,000 to 700 years ago, or 700 to 1,000 years ago, said, look, this is not a question that we should seriously debate, and this is certainly not something that we should examine in terms of when and how Mashiach will come. But Chazal does say that the non-Jews, the Goyim, will know of Mashiach before the Jews do. And I experienced this nearly 20 years ago. I was in Bethlehem, just over here. I was involved in a slight traffic accident, and with an Arab driver who said, I will take your car and bring it to my garage and we'll fix it. Come back tomorrow, and I did, and the car was fixed. But while I'm waiting for the car, one of the...
This is before the first Intifada.
1992, nearly 20 years ago.
So there was no Intifada.
It was after the Intifada, just the beginnings of Oslo. And one of the people in the garage starts talking to me in Arabic. And he says to me, you know, the Mashiach is coming. I wasn't really sure what he was trying to tell me. I go, what do you mean? He goes, the Jewish Messiah is coming. I said, how do you know? And he said to me, don't you see? It says, and again, I've never heard these words in Arabic, you know, given that most of my conversation or my listening was to media or whatever. He says, V'kabetz nidachenu me'arba kanfot ha'aretz. The Jews are coming from four corners of the world. They're coming from Ethiopia, they're coming from Russia, they're coming from America. I said, ah. He said, so do you think that's the Mashiach? I said, 100%, he said. I said, who? I said, what are you, Muslim? Are you Christian? He says, I am a Syrian Aramaic. I daven in Aramit, the language of Onkelos. And you must know that in Malachim, there is a long history, actually it begins with Lavan, of how the Aramaic people, or Aram, knew more of the value of Judaism and worship of God than the Jews themselves. In fact, one of the biggest enemies of the Jews in the times of Malachim was Ben-Hadad, who asked Eliyahu to pray for him because he understood that the God of the Jews, I guess as we know it, is the God who works. On the other hand, The Medrash says, Liba Lapumya Logaya. What is in my heart should not reveal itself to my mouth. In other words, my heart may know when Mashiach is coming and how he will come and the signs of it, but it's not something which should be expressed. But the Goyim knew. And indeed, if you look at the reference here of number 3, HaPlishtim chiku sheva shanim ad shekol Yisrael kibel et David va'az ein takfu. David HaMelech became the king. And the first 7 years of him becoming the king, he was in Hebron. And the Medrash says that most of the Bnei Yisrael, with the exception of Yehuda, did not accept David HaMelech. It took 7 years. During those 7 years, the land was quiet. As soon as the Jewish people accepted David HaMelech, the Plishtim attacked. Because the Plishtim understood that the Mashiach, and David is considered the first Mashiach, will not be effective unless he unites the Jews, unless he brings the Jews together, and then he will be effective. And that's when the Plishtim chose to attack.
But you could say, it's a koshi. Why would they choose, in terms of military tactics, why would you choose to attack united? You should want to attack a disunited enemy. So, while this may make sense, may make us feel good, oh, that's a riot that the Jews were together, because in terms of the Plishtim's head, it's a little difficult.
Okay. Let's go to the story of the Midbar. The Medrash says when the Jews left Mitzrayim, the nations of in Eretz Yisrael panicked. They go, oh my God, they're on their way. And some of the nations began a scorched earth policy, destroying everything. Then they said, they're not here. Oh. And they rebuilt everything from scratch, and then the Jews came. The point is, there are precedents, as you say, where you strike first, and then you say, wait a minute, I came way too early. And then there are those who say, wait a minute, let's wait until we know it's for sure. Again, it works either way. Like, as I said before, some of the Rishonim were very much opposed to trying to examine, let alone figuring out when Mashiach will come. However, and this is perhaps not coincidental, over the last 150 years, most of the Achronim, most of the rabbis said something is happening here, and we can no longer ignore the signs of Mashiach. And the Malbim was a chief proponent of that, even though he was heavily criticized in pre-World War II Europe. But he said we cannot. Yes, but he was studied.
He wasn't people.
He was studied heavily, and the question of what the Zionists were doing was a matter of huge debate. Indeed, the Vizhnitzer Rebbe, before World War II, said during the debate, leave them alone, meaning leave the secular Zionists alone. The fact that these people who have no shaykhs, who have no connection to Judaism, are rebuilding the land is in fact a tremendous thing and could very well be a kapara, a redemption of sorts for the sins of the first and second Beis HaMikdash. Indeed, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said this, the Frierdiker Rebbe, not the Rebbe now, the previous Rebbe. He said like this, he said something, but he said it in a different way. He said, why were non-Jews, or are non-Jews, attracted to Zionism? And he said something very important. He said these are people who very much want to assimilate. Whether to communism, whether to socialism, whether to Bundism, whatever. But they were rejected. The Goyim said, we don't want you. So in their failure to assimilate, they said, we're going to do something else. And they said, we'll make a nation, and that nation will end up assimilating. Of course, we know today that did not happen, but we also know that because of what started out as a way to get away from Torah brought them much, much closer to Torah. And here, this is what we say here, davar shelo lishma, something which is done or begun, something that was not for its own sake, ends up being for its own sake. Okay. There were previous attempts during the last 1,000 years to settle Eretz Yisrael. So it's not as if the settlement in the late 19th century, early 20th century was the first time. But they failed. A few hundred years ago, the Dan Yosef Hanassi received permission from the Turkish Sultan to bring people into Eretz Yisrael and to build, and that was with permission of the government. The Arabs attacked and kept attacking and foiled us. So now the question was to the entire Jewish world, something's happening here. Something is happening here in that this is succeeding. And therefore, we go to understanding what will be different what will be different between previous attempts and this attempt in terms of the Mashiach. So, the Rambam puts it very succinctly. HaMelech HaMashiach atid lamod ulachzir malchut David liyoshno lamemshala harishona uvoneh hamikdash. He will build the Beis Hamikdash. He will bring a government. Build the Beis Hamikdash. Umakabetz nitchei Amo Yisrael. Bring together, ingather the exiles. V'chozrin kol mishpatim b'yamav shahayu mekodem. Bring back all the laws that were previously, including karbonos, etc. And the question is, how will we know that he's successful? The Rambam says very simply, Im asa v'yitzliach, harei ze Mashiach b'vadai. If he does it, he's the Mashiach, period. And if he doesn't do it, he may be other things. He may be a very good person, but he's not the Mashiach. Now the Rambam holds like Rabbi Akiva. And we hold like Rabbi Akiva and Chazal maybe 90% of the time. And this is, to me, was an eye-opener as I began to explore this. We see Bar Kochva, we see Rabbi Akiva's support of Bar Kochva after Bayit Sheni as a mistake. Okay, he made, and by the way, there was a split between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel over whether to support the rebellion of Bar Kochva. But the Rambam says it was not a mistake. Bar Kochva was what he calls the Cheskat HaMashiach. He was he was held as the Mashiach. But, says the Rambam, because of his sins, Bar Kochva's sins, he did not succeed. Again, V'dima Shehu haya Mashiach, V'dima v'chol chachmei hador, everyone thought he was Mashiach, ad sheneherag ba'avonot. He was killed because of his sins, Bar Kochva's sins. V'kevan sheneherag, noda lehem she'ino. In other words,
This was also Chizkiyahu's problem. This was also Chizkiyahu's problem.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is empirical proof, but what occurs to me is the Rambam says we're going to have korbanot, but the Rambam himself, in other places, said no, we're not going to have korbanot in Bayit Shlishi. You know what I mean? It's a very difficult. The Rambam, she felt the Rambam himself is difficult.
The Rambam does contradict, or seems to contradict himself in several places.
I didn't say contradiction, but it's not as it's not impossible.
But the Rambam also distinguishes between several phases of Mashiach, and one of the things that the Chachamim say is that do not believe that Mashiach will come and everything will be right instantaneously, but it will be in stages. And indeed, the Medrash suggests that the last stage will be Mashiach.